This video is on piecewise functions. We are going to be writing it piecewise from a graph. So again, we want to figure out the equations of these two graphs with their restrictions, and also find the domain and range of the entire graph. So we have our x and our y axis. We have two graphs going on here, so I'm going to use pink and blue to represent them. The first on the left, I'm going to use this one as my first graph. This is graph 1. And then the other graph on the right hand side will be graph 2. So what I'm going to have, I'm going to go ahead and start it over here. Since this is the second example, I'm going to put it as b of x just because I wanted example b. Then I'll have my squiggle bracket so we can have our two equations in here. Now we can start our restrictions. We can start by doing our restrictions. So for the pink one, I'm going to put a comma here so I can write my restrictions. I have one endpoint, so in one arrow. My graph will keep going to the left, but it will stop here. So I know I'm going to have a negative infinity, which means in the restrictions, it's going to be a less than. My first x value is at that negative 2, so it's going to be x is less than that negative 2. But it will not have an equality because this is open, so it's just going to be x is less than negative 2. For the blue one, I'm going to have my comma. My first x value is 4, and then it goes to a positive infinity, so I'm going to have a greater than. So I'm going to have x is greater than that positive 4. Since it is closed on the 4, it'll be greater than or equal to that positive 4. So now we can go find the equations. This function is in the shape of an absolute value because it's two lines connecting to a vertex. So for an absolute value, you need to know your vertex and then your slope. So this vertex right here is at negative 4 x value, and negative 5 for the y value. Then we also need to find our slope. So we always go from our vertex and we go towards the right. So we have to go up 1 and then right 2 to get to that coordinate. So up 1, right 2. That means our slope is 1/2. So this equation would be our a value is 1/2, absolute value of x, minus the h value, so it would be plus 4, absolute value, plus your k value, so that'd be minus 5. So our equation is 1/2 absolute value of x plus 4, then minus 5, with the restriction of x is less than negative 2. For the blue one, this is going to be a square root function. We need to determine what our a value is. Absolute value, the a value was your slope. We need the a value from the square root. So we need the h, so this is for our second equation, h, our k, an x, and a y, so that we can find our a value. So the hk will be 4, that's our starting point, that's 4, 0. And another coordinate could be this 5, 1 right here. So 5, 1 is another coordinate. So h is 4, k is 0, x is 5, y is 1, and we are trying to figure out the y equals a times square root of x minus h, then plus k. So we have 1 is equal to a times the square root of 5 minus 4 plus 0. So plus 0 doesn't do anything, so we have 1 equals a times the square root of 1, which is just 1, so a is equal to just 1. So that helps us. So our blue equation will be your 1 as your a value, times the square root of x minus your h, so minus 4, and then plus your k, so plus 0, you don't have to put anything there. We have just found the two equations and the restrictions that will represent this graph, this piecewise graph. The last thing we need to do is find the domain and range of this entire graph. Domain. The farthest left is an arrow, and the farthest right is an arrow. So we will have negative and positive infinity. So we're going to start with the negative infinity. From this negative infinity, we're going to go to the right, to the right, to the right, to the right, stop. This is an open circle, and since I want to go to the right, I look to see if there's anything up or down I could jump to. There's nothing I can jump to, so I have to stop here. That's at that -2, and it's open. Union. So the next space I can go to, so that was -2, it was open. There's nothing at -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, but there is something at 4, so I can start at 4 again. And it is closed at 4. And then I can keep going right until I hit that arrow again. So it'll go to that positive infinity. The range, the lowest y value is actually here at this -5, and the highest y value is the arrow. There's actually an arrow here and an arrow here. So if I could easily get from this y value to either one of those arrows, I'm going to. I can easily get from this y value to that arrow without having to stop. So that will go from our -5 to a positive infinity without actually having to stop. Sorry, that's -5 to positive infinity. And there's your domain and range, as well as the equations that represent this graph and the restrictions of the equations.